God speaks into the dark, formless water, and a universe is assembled word by word. A river turns thick with blood, architecture beneath the number. At the exact historical moments where this specific count is deployed, at the physical weight, the entire congregation erupts into a weeping, hysterical panic. They decide to stone Moses. They decide to elect a new captain. They decide to turn their backs on the 10 words and march back to the whips and chains of Pharaoh. God steps into the chaos. He speaks to Moses, and he uses a very specific number. You find it in Numbers chapter 14, verse 21. God says, "None of the men who have seen my glory and my signs that I did in Egypt and in the wilderness, and yet have put me to the test these 10 times, and have not obeyed my voice, shall see the land." 10 times. This is not a God losing his temper. This is a judge reading the final tally of a completed test. God gave them a perfect system of 10 words to build a world of life. They responded with a perfect system of 10 rebellions to destroy it. They matched his 10 acts of creation with 10 acts of decreation. The measure of their testing has reached its absolute limit. The boundary line is crossed. The test is over. God decrees that this entire generation will walk the scorching desert until their bones become dust, and only their children will cross the river. The wilderness becomes a graveyard for the generation that broke the 10. Of the scenes themselves, you start to see a structure that the rulebook reading completely misses. 10 is not a random quantity, but the test of the 10 does not stay in the desert. Centuries later, the same test appears, in a completely different empire, in a completely different language, on the dining table of a foreign king. In the literary architecture of the Hebrew Bible, the Babylonian exile serves as the catastrophic reversal of the Exodus. Instead of slaves marching out of a pagan empire to inherit a promised land, the citizens of the promised land are dragged away in chains to serve in a pagan empire. Babylon is the anti-Eden. It is a suffocating system of idolatry designed to completely overwrite the identity of anyone it conquers. When the narrative of Daniel opens, the empire is systematically trying to unmake 4 young Hebrew exiles. King Nebuchadnezzar initiates a 3-year re-education program designed to strip away their language, their names, and their diet. The psychological pressure of the royal court is immense. You can imagine the sensory overload of the Babylonian dining halls, heavy gold plates piled high with rich, ritually sacrificed meats, the air thick with the smell of roasted fat and sweet, intoxicating wine. To eat the king's food is to accept the king's reality. It is a physical declaration of dependence on the empire. Daniel refuses the king's table, and the exact parameters he sets for his resistance are staggering. It is the architecture of a test. Whenever you see the number 10 in the biblical narrative, you are watching a boundary line being drawn in the sand. He looks at the chief eunuch and issues a highly specific challenge. Recorded in Daniel chapter 1, he asks for a diet of strictly vegetables and water, and he asks to be tested for exactly 10 days. From a purely physiological standpoint, this time frame makes very little sense. A human body does not undergo a radical, visible transformation in a week and a half just by switching from meat to seeds. If this were merely a historical account of ancient nutrition, a 10-day trial would be scientifically meaningless. But the author of this text is not writing a medical journal. The author is invoking the mathematical signature of the covenant. The 10 days are not a dietary trial. They are a covenantal battleground. By demanding a test of 10, Daniel is reaching all the way back to the smoke of Mount Sinai and the dark waters of Genesis. He is drawing a theological line in the cold marble floor of the palace. He is betting his very life that the God who built the cosmos with 10 words, and who organized human flourishing with 10 words, can sustain his people in the middle of a pagan empire for 10 days. Daniel is weaponizing the number of absolute fullness against the most powerful king on earth. When the 10th day arrives, the physical results defy natural biology. You are watching a measure of human responsibility reach its absolute fullness. God sets a table of 10, and he steps back. The 4 young men are literally glowing. Their skin is clearer, their bodies stronger, and their minds sharper than every single youth, who gorged themselves on the king's rich food. The test of the 10 validates the faithful. The framework of God proves infinitely stronger than the synthetic machinery of the empire. That quiet act of rebellion in a Babylonian dining hall solidifies the pattern for the rest of the biblical narrative. But the ultimate test of the 10 is not fought over a plate of vegetables. It is fought in the freezing dark, waiting for a bridegroom who is running violently late. Night falls on a first-century village. The air turns freezing cold. The scent of burning pitch hangs in the darkness. 10 young women sit on the edge of the road. They are waiting for a wedding procession. They hold clay lamps. 5 carry heavy clay flasks of extra olive oil. 5 carry nothing but the oil already soaking their wicks. The bridegroom delays. The hours drag. The women fall asleep. At midnight, a shout shatters the silence. The procession is coming. Torches flare in the distance. The women wake. They strike their flint. The wicks catch fire. But for 5 of them, the flame sputters, chokes, and dies. He waits to see what humanity will do with the complete set. Will they trust the design? Or will they break it to build their own? Their lamps are going out. They beg for oil. The others refuse. The foolish run into the dark to buy what they should have brought. The bridegroom arrives. The procession enters the house. The heavy wooden door scrapes shut. The lock turns. The 5 return, banging their fists against the wood in the freezing night. But the master of the feast refuses to open it. Now, flip forward a few chapters in the Gospels. A rabbi walks down a dusty road on the border of Samaria. 10 men stand at a distance. The wind carries the stench of infection. Their clothes are torn. Their skin is rotting with leprosy. They scream for mercy. The rabbi does not touch them. He issues a single command. Go show yourselves to the priests. They turn. They walk. And as they walk, the lesions vanish. The skin knits back together. The nerve endings fire again. They are healed, but only one stops. Only one turns around, falls on his face in the dirt, and screams his thanks. The other 9 disappear into their new, healthy lives. Look at the numbers. Look at the architecture. 10 virgins are tested by a delay. 10 lepers are tested by a healing. In both stories, the number 10 establishes a complete group. This is not a metric for behavior modification. It is a diagnostic tool for human allegiance. Picture the most famous 10 in history. They all face the exact same conditions. They all hold the exact same invitation. But in the end, the group violently fractures. Jesus is not randomly picking the number 10 for his parables. He is deploying the ancient diagnostic tool. Whenever Jesus sets up a story with 10 people, he is telling a Jewish audience that a cosmic test is underway. The 10 words of Sinai tested Israel. The 10 days in Babylon tested Daniel. Now, the arrival of the Messiah is testing the entire generation. The 10 virgins and the 10 lepers reveal the terrifying reality of the kingdom. Belonging to the group of 10 does not save you. Experiencing the miracle does not save you. The test is not about who stands in the crowd. It is about what happens when the crowd is forced to respond. But this diagnostic tool is not just locked away in ancient parables. It is operating right now. Beneath the surface of the modern world, we are a species obsessed with metrics. We want a spreadsheet for our morality. We sit under the fluorescent lights of our modern lives, staring at the cold glow of our screens. And we assume God manages the universe the way we manage a corporate balance sheet. We treat the biblical number 10 like a multiple-choice exam, operating under the deeply flawed assumption that God grades on a curve. The Israelites are standing at the base of Mount Sinai. The ground beneath their leather sandals is literally vibrating. If we can just hit 7 out of 10 commandments, if we can just manage a 70% obedience rate, we assume we have passed the test. We think we have done enough. When we are handed our own closed systems, our marriages, our vocations, our quiet seasons of obscurity, we constantly try to rewrite the parameters. We want the peace of the new creation. but we want to build it using the chaotic mud and straw of our own personal empires. But that is a modern, Western projection. The biblical 10 does not work like a performance review. It is a structural integrity test. Think about the architecture of a suspension bridge. You do not get to remove 3 of the 10 load-bearing cables and argue that the bridge is still mostly successful. The tension must be complete. The system relies on the absolute fullness of its design. When the biblical text brings the number 10 into your life, it is not asking for a majority percentage of your effort. It is declaring that your environment of testing has reached its absolute boundary. You see this in the architecture of our own suffering. When you enter a wilderness season, you do not get to negotiate the timeline. You might feel the heat of the trial, the suffocating pressure in your chest, the literal ache in your jaw from grinding your teeth at night. You beg for the test to end at 3. The air smells like ozone, sulfur, and scorched earth. The sky is completely blotted out by a localized storm. You bargain for it to end at 7, but if the design requires 10, the season will not lift a second early. God is not extending the pain to be cruel. He is holding the exact measure of the number because a complete decreation of your old attachments requires a complete system of time. The test must run its full course. The 10 must be fulfilled. But there is a profound grace hidden inside this rigid number. If 10 is the absolute boundary of a test, it also means the test has a fixed limit. The wilderness does not last forever. The plagues do not strike 11 times. The testing of human allegiance is a closed system. And when the 10th beat drops, the era changes. The old world ends, and the new creation begins. Which brings us to the final deployment of the number. The entire biblical narrative builds toward one last, terrifyingly quiet, test of 10. A group of men and women are locked in a stone room in Jerusalem. They have just watched their rabbi ascend into the clouds, and they are given a single, maddening instruction before the new creation can finally burst open. Wait, the room is silent. The windows are shuttered against the noise of the Jerusalem streets. 120 people sit on the stone floor, of thick black smoke. They have just walked through a sea that stood up like walls. They are entirely dependent on a flaky, sweet bread. The air is thick with dust, body heat, and unfiltered anxiety. Jesus is gone. He walked out of a tomb, stayed for exactly 40 days, and ascended from the Mount of Olives. He left them with a single, maddening command. Do not leave the city. Wait for the promise of the Father. He did not tell them how long, but we know the math of the Jewish calendar. Pentecost, the ancient festival of Shavuot. The celebration of the giving of the law at Sinai happens exactly 50 days after the Passover Sabbath. Jesus ascended on day 40. The fire of the Spirit falls on day 50. That leaves a gap of exactly 10 days. Day 1 passes. No wind. No fire. Day 2. The stone floor is hard. Day 3. Day 4. The adrenaline of the ascension fades. The silence becomes suffocating. Will they fracture like the Israelites in the desert? Will they abandon the room and walk back to their fishing nets in Galilee? Will they build a new golden calf out of their own impatience? They are sitting at the base of a new Sinai. The 10 days are not a logistical delay. They are a covenantal test. This is God setting the table of 10, one last time before the era shifts entirely. He steps back. He waits to see what this new remnant of humanity will do with the closed system of waiting. Day 7, Day 8, Day 9. They hold the line. They do not pick up stones. They do not complain about the food that appears on the cold morning dew. And now, out of the blinding fire, they are given a framework. They stay in the room, and they pray. And then the sun rises on the 10th day. The boundary line is crossed. The measure of their waiting reaches its absolute fullness. The test is complete. The system holds. A sound like a violent, rushing wind tears through the ceiling. The building physically shakes. The scent of ozone and fire fills the room. Tongues of flame drop from the air and rest on their heads. At Sinai, The 10 words were carved into cold, heavy rock. In the upper room, the new creation is burned directly into the human chest. The architecture of the test is complete, but the pattern does not stay locked in the 1st century. What happens when the architect of the 10 turns his attention to the specific wilderness you are walking through today? God spoke 10 times into the dark, and a cosmos was built. A river bled under 10 strikes, and an empire was unmade. A mountain burned with 10 words, and a pocket-sized Eden was handed down in stone. A generation rebelled 10 times, and the desert became their grave. A young exile tested his God for 10 days, and his mind outshone Babylon. 10 bridesmaids fell asleep in the freezing dark, and a wedding door was locked forever. 120 believers waited 10 days, and an empire is dismantled, plague by plague. A mountain catches fire in the desert, and a covenant is carved into a slab of rock. Not 11 rules, not 9 suggestions. 10. We call them the 10 Commandments. But that phrasing tricks us into seeing a cold, legal document in a silent room, and the fire of a new creation finally fell. Same number, same God. But maybe the part that stays with me most is that stone room in Jerusalem. 120 people, staring at a ceiling, feeling the dust and the body heat for 10 agonizing days. They were not waiting on a logistical delay. They were sitting inside a covenantal test, a closed system of waiting, designed to see if humanity would finally hold the line without breaking it. If you are in a season where the silence of God feels suffocating, where the trial is dragging into its 9th day and you are desperately tempted to build your own golden calf, you need to remember the architecture of the test. The waiting is not random. It is an environment of absolute fullness. The trial has a boundary line, and God is not extending the timeline just to be cruel. He is holding the exact measure of the number until the creation inside of you is complete. And may the God who holds the precise measure of your wilderness walk with you through the fire and bring you out the other side, carrying a kingdom you could not have received any other way. If this reached something in you, subscribe, leave a comment, even one word helps. Share this with someone who, it tricks us into seeing a cosmic courtroom where a distant judge is just handing out demerits for bad behavior, is walking through a season of testing right now. Pray for us as we keep digging into these texts. The problem is, that framework shrinks the story. It makes the number small. It completely ignores why the number 10 was chosen for the fire on the mountain in the first place. To understand what is actually happening in the smoke at Sinai, you cannot start at the mountain. The pattern was already running long before the stone was cut. The blueprint was laid down before human beings even had breath in their lungs. There is a detail hiding in plain sight. On the very first page of your Bible, to understand the test, you have to go back to the dark water. We open the ancient text of Genesis, and the very first thing we encounter is not a theology lesson. We encounter a rhythm. Scholars have long noted the meticulous, almost mathematical structure of the Hebrew creation narrative. The text does not rush. It breathes. It builds a cosmos the way a master architect lays out a cathedral, measuring every pillar and vault, ensuring every cornerstone is perfectly aligned. A nation sends scouts into a promised valley, and a terrifying report breaks the spine of an entire generation. And the primary tool of this cosmic construction is speech. The phrase, "and God said," rings out into the dark. Watery void. Light spills across the canvas. Water separates from water, pulling back to reveal dry land, pushing up through the surface. Seeds burst into fruit, and stars ignite in the black expanse. If you trace a finger down the parchment of that first chapter, counting every time, the phrase, "and God said," appears to bring something new into existence. You do not find a random number. You find exactly 10 utterances. The ancient rabbinic scholars noticed this pattern centuries ago and asked a brilliant question. Could God not have created the world with a single word? Could the Creator not have simply spoken one universal command and brought it all into being at once? The answer they settled on was about gravity. It was about the structural weight of reality. The universe is not a sudden, careless accident. It is a 10-part spoken masterpiece. 10 becomes the biblical number of a complete, closed system. It is the absolute measure of perfect order. When God wants to build a habitable reality out of absolute chaos, He uses exactly 10 commands to do it. These 10 words of Genesis are the engine of life itself, setting the boundaries for what is safe, what is good, and what is intended for human flourishing. A young exile eats only vegetables, and his mind outshines the royal court of Babylon. 10 bridesmaids trim their oil wicks. You can almost feel the cadence of it, a steady, pulsing heartbeat of creation. A word is spoken, and reality bends to obey it. The air fills with the scent of damp soil, the roar of rushing rivers, the blinding heat of a newly formed sun. It is a world in total harmony, perfectly reflecting the intention of the one who spoke it. This sets the baseline for the entire biblical story. Whenever humanity is handed a completed system of 10, they are being handed an environment of perfect order. They are being handed a garden. The test is always whether they will submit to the 10 words that build life, or whether they will rebel against them and fracture the system. And centuries later, when an arrogant Pharaoh decides he wants to build his own empire on the backs of enslaved people, God does not just punish him, God systematically dismantles his world. And, to tear down a false creation, God uses the exact same number He used to build the original one. Pharaoh sits on a throne of carved stone. He thinks he is a god. He believes he owns the water, the soil, and the people. He holds an entire nation in a brutal, crushing grip, building a synthetic empire out of mud and straw. So God sends an 80-year-old man with a wooden staff to the edge of the river. Moses lifts the wood. The water shifts, in the freezing midnight air, waiting for a bridegroom who is running late. Same number, again and again. The Nile turns into a thick, slow-moving artery of blood. The scent of dead fish and warm copper fills the air, and the rhythm begins. The river bleeds. The frogs swarm. The dust bites. The flies devour. The livestock drop dead in the fields. Boils erupt on human skin. Ice and fire fall from a shattered sky. Locusts strip the trees bare. And then, a darkness so heavy and suffocating you can physically feel it, pressing against your face. 10 strikes. 10 blows. The 10 plagues of Egypt are not a random assortment of magic tricks designed to show off divine muscle. They are a systematic decreation. Look at the pattern. In Genesis, God spoke 10 times to organize the water, settle the land, bring forth animals, and give humanity light. He built a system of life. In Egypt, Pharaoh has violently abused that creation. He has turned a garden into a graveyard. So God takes the 10 words of life and runs them in reverse. He turns the water toxic. He turns the soil into swarms of biting insects. He weaponizes the animals. He blots out the sun. He is unspeaking the cosmos. He is taking the 10 building blocks of reality and pulling them apart, one by one, until Pharaoh's false world collapses into absolute, screaming chaos. The measure of Pharaoh's rebellion reached its limit, and the system broke. The final blow falls at midnight. A cry goes up across the Egyptian capital. The chains shatter. 1 million freed slaves walk out into the desert. Most people assume the number 10 in the biblical text is just a mathematical convenience. We assume it is simply leaving a ruined, dismantled empire behind them. They walk through a parted sea. They eat bread scraped from the morning frost. They arrive at the base of a blackened mountain, waiting to hear the voice of the God who just unmade the most powerful nation on earth. They are standing in the wilderness, stripped of everything they knew. They need a new world. They need a new system of order to replace the chaos of Egypt. And when the fire descends and God finally speaks, He does not give them commandments. To see what He actually hands them in the smoke, you have to read the stone in Hebrew. Open your Bible to Exodus chapter 34, verse 88. Moses has been on the burning peak of Sinai, enveloped in thick, suffocating smoke for weeks. He is kneeling in the ash, holding two heavy slabs of rough-hewn stone. The text tells us exactly what God writes onto the surface of those tablets. But almost every English translation fundamentally alters the phrasing, and in doing so, it shrinks the majesty of the entire moment. We are told God wrote the 10 Commandments. But the word for commandment or law, such as mitzvah or Torah, is not actually in the original Hebrew text here. The phrase in Exodus is Aseret HaDvarim. The word Aseret comes from the root eser, which simply means 10, and Devarim is the plural of Debar. How many fingers we have? We like top 10 lists. So we project that cultural habit onto the text, which translates as word, speech, or matter. In ancient Hebrew thought, a dabar is not just vibrating air expelled from a mouth. It is a concrete reality. It is a substance. Literally translated, Moses comes down the mountain carrying the 10 words. If something about this linguistic detail is stirring up questions you've never considered, you're exactly who this channel is for. Drop a thought in the comments and hit subscribe. Because every week we go deeper into the text than you knew was possible. So, Moses carries the 10 words down into the camp. This specific phrasing is not a coincidence. To an ancient Hebrew reader, hearing about 10 words that establish order out of the chaos of the wilderness would trigger an immediate, visceral flashback. They would hear the undeniable echo of Genesis chapter 1. God used 10 spoken words to build the physical cosmos out of a dark, watery void. Now, God is using 10 written words to build a social and moral cosmos out of the brutal chaos of Egyptian slavery. The stones are not a penal code designed to restrict human freedom. They are a pocket-sized Eden. If the people of Israel will align their lives with these 10 words, they will recreate the harmony of the original garden, right there in the dry desert dirt. They will become a living, breathing sanctuary, and assume God likes top 10 lists too. We read the stories and conclude that 10 is just a handy container, where God can dwell safely with humanity. The number 10 here represents the absolute fullness of this new creation. It is the perfect measure of their relationship with the architect. But it is also the ultimate metric of a test. God has handed them a complete, unbroken system of 10. The only question left is what they will do with humanity's portion of the covenant. Will they protect the design? Or will they shatter it? They pack up their tents. They follow the pillar of cloud away from the blackened mountain. But this new creation does not last long. In fact, it does not even survive the walk across the sand. The sand is burning beneath their feet. The bread falls every morning like frost on the desert floor. The water rushes out of a violently split rock. They have the 10 words written on heavy stone. They have the blinding presence of God burning in a pillar of fire directly over their camp. They have every piece required to build the new Eden. But the memory of Egypt is heavy. The fear is louder than the promise. They stand on the muddy banks of the Red Sea. The chariots of Pharaoh are roaring in the distance, iron wheels grinding against the rocks. The people panic. They accuse God of dragging them out to die. That is one. They reach the springs of Mara for moral rules, or a quick way to round up a historical headcount. But if you look closer at the water is bitter and burns their throats. They rebel against Moses. That is two. They walk into the arid, lifeless expanse of the desert of sin. Their stomachs cramp. They accuse God of starving them. That is three. They are told to gather only enough manna for one day. They hoard it, and it breeds worms in the dark. They are told to rest on the Sabbath. They walk out into the fields to gather anyway. They camp at Rephidim. Their throats are parched, and they pick up stones to murder their leader. They camp at the base of Sinai. They melt their Egyptian gold into a calf and worship a metal cow, while the mountain above them is literally on fire. They camp at Taberah. They complain about the heat, the walking, the dust. They camp at Kibroth Hattava. They weep aloud for the fish, the cucumbers, and the garlic of the empire that enslaved them. 9 times. 9 fractures in the new creation. And then they reach the southern border of the promised land. The air shifts. The scouts return from the valley of Eshkol, carrying a cluster of grapes so massive it takes 2 grown men and a wooden pole to carry it. But the scouts bring terror. They describe giants with thick spears. They describe walled cities that scrape the sky.